Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you for another week. This week, time seemed to run away from me, and it is actually Thursday, July 6th. The episode that's going to be released on Friday, because all my episodes are usually current. I'm now recording it. I'm pretty late. It's going to be a late night, but I'll get it to you on time at 5 a.m. Actually, 5 a.m. when it goes live. It's a pleasure, as I said, to be here with you for another week. Making choices of topics is getting kind of tricky because I plan these things and then things happen in the news that turn our world upside down. This week, I've been prompted to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court and some of their decisions and how it impacts lives, including people like myself. So, hang in there, sit back, relax, grab you a cup of coffee, a cup of juice, do whatever you do, and I'll be right back. So welcome back to 247 Real Talk Podcast. Again, my name is Julian Perry. I'm the host, and I'm honored to be with you for another week. I've become very accustomed to this now. It's been going on 3 years since I launched this podcast, and I'd like to think that I've made a lot of difference in some people's lives and provoked thought in other people's minds, and help some people to keep in touch with what's going on with their, when they're so busy in their lives and they don't get to pay attention to some of the details. So like I said, again, I had something else planned for this week, and then, like a gift wrapped in a Christmas package, here comes the Supreme Court and its decisions. Now, unless you've been hiding under a rock or really don't make a real effort to stay away from all news, you would have known that a few days ago, Supreme Court announced several decisions, serious decisions that impact millions of lives. I'm going to touch on three of them on this episode. One being the student loan debt and President Biden's plan. One being affirmative action with colleges and universities. And the other being the strange need for ruling against the LGBTQI community, at least the way I see it. That was, I think, in many people's eyes, sort of made us take yet another look at the whole Supreme Court and its makeup and its purpose, because that really didn't make sense. So let me start with the LGBTQI decision. I believe it was a woman in Colorado who designed the website, who claimed that because she was in the state of Colorado that had laws that said that she couldn't turn anyone's business down as a public business provider, as a public business, that she should have the right to choose not to serve certain clients if it's against her values or her religion or whatever the case may be, her beliefs. Now, before I go any further, there's been a lot more coming out on this issue, and I'm not sure exactly what's true or not, and I really haven't had the time to delve into it as deep as I should, and even then I might not be able to discern it. I've heard things like the whole business thing is fictitious. I've heard things, I read somewhere where the people in question that this all started with, that it was a heterosexual male who never even went to that website, and this was all concocted to force a certain decision. Again, this is all alleged. I do not know the facts. I'm telling you what I've read like you would if you've paid attention to the news. But when I talked to this, a whole diverse group of people that I chatted with this issue about, we all came with the same conclusion. Okay, you have a business. You have your own beliefs and values. You may want someone to say, look, you can't force me to take a client. I have a right to choose a client. Okay. But why did the Supreme Court have to go and make it a law? Was that necessary, and do they understand the wide-reaching impact of that? Because that can, or probably already has morphed into discrimination for reasons, any reason now, right? So in addition to being unfair to the LGBTQ community in the sense that, again, a business owner says, look, I don't want your business. I'm not sure I can argue with that. But the Supreme Court has made it law. So now it's okay for them to say, people to say, I don't want you. I'm not serving you as a public entity, as a public business because you're LGBTQI, because you're a person of color, because you're a woman, because you're a Democrat, because you're a Republican, because you're any reason they can choose to now. Why did the Supreme Court feel the need to go that far to make it law? And standing by itself alone, it may, it has one level of impact, but there's something bigger going on here. For those of you who are not prejudiced, for those of you who believe in all of us being equal, for those of you who believe, when I say all of us being equal, all of us should be equal. For those of you who believe that every race, creed, and culture have the same opportunities and the same opportunity to live in the same manner, you have to see how much we are regressing as a society. I mean, we are in trouble, and every single decision that the Supreme Court made here has added to the degradation of society and all the years of and efforts and work of people who've died for causes. All of their work is beginning to become work that's in vain. Look at the decision about President Biden's student loans. It's not so much that I'm concerned, because they're saying, well, the decision should be made by Congress. And if you stand on that alone, and we had a Congress that was willing to actually work for the people, by the people, then that would have been okay. But the fact of the matter is, during COVID, when they had what they call the PPP loans, there are even members of Congress who had millions of dollars forgiven, debt wiped out, loans forgiven. And they are the ones now voting against a person who is struggling to put food on their table and to feed their kids, getting $20,000 forgiven. The hypocrisy is stunning. And the fact that people can see this in front of their faces and find ways to rationalize it so that it makes sense is scary. The fact that human beings who, just like you and I, who breathe the same way, who feel pain the same way, who live the same life that we live in terms of waking up every morning and going to sleep every night, living amongst people can feel that it's okay for one group of people who can probably afford it, who are much richer, much wealthier, who are wealthy, period. It's okay for them to get thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of dollars of loans forgiven. Be a part of our governing body of government and turn around and make a decision that people can't get $10,000 or $20,000 in student loan debt forgiven. When they know that the system of education is broken, when they know that the system of employment is broken, when they realize and in their mind whether they want to ignore it so they could sleep at night, that their systemic racism still exists rampant across this country, and many people of color cannot achieve the same as people who are Caucasian. Many people of color can't get the same job with the same income, even though they have the same qualifications. Many people of color can't even get hired when they're going up against other candidates who are white. Let's not sugarcoat this. And I know many people will sit there who have that hatred and that ideology in their minds and say, listen to this guy talking, he's racist. No, I speak the truth. I have many friends of all races, creeds, and colors, including many friends who are white, who will stand beside me to deliver this message because they're willing to see the truth. Their religion, their belief, whatever they do, it allows them to have a clear and honest conscience to see the inequalities that are growing again. It is amazing to see what the Supreme Court, the most powerful body, is doing to this country on the backs of political ideology, of hatred of one party against another, of hatred of one race against others. My father is a retired judge, not in the United States of America, in another country. I'm not going to call the country because I don't want to lose the focus of this. He was a judge of the highest court of the land. My father will be 92 years old come January 2nd of 2024. He's from the old school. And every time I hear him talk about how ashamed he is of what the judiciary in countries across the world has become, where people are, and I'm going to leave that to the last part because I really want to go in on the whole Supreme Court issue. So, not wanting to make this too long because I think we've been beaten up this week on these issues. I'm going to go to the third decision that really bothers me, and that's a decision that reverses a part of the affirmative action. And people don't seem to get it. The minute the Supreme Court made a decision, first of all, our former President Trump came out publicly and said, it's a great day for America. That alone tells you that his America is not our America. That alone tells you that for the millions upon millions of millions, the majority of people in this country who are people of color, mixed races, are not part of his America. And the thing about it is, you either have to be racist or ignorant to believe that that's a great day for America. Many people look at it on the surface and say, well, you should not be admitted to college just because of your color. When someone says that in a vacuum, I dismiss them. I am done with the conversation with you because you honestly don't understand what lies beneath that. It's not just about letting someone in or giving someone preference to enter a university or college because of color. It has to do with all the disadvantages that those people of color, us people of color, have suffered. It has to do with an action that is helping us get a leg up and move forward, helping us achieve dreams that others take for granted because they are not people of color, helping us achieve dreams that, let's put it, that white people take advantage of. You can walk around this country any color you want, and you can walk around this country as a white person and stick your head in the sand. But if we go back all the way to slavery, where black people were slaves, owned by white people, if you understand that history, then that alone, if you have the common sense to rationalize, should tell you that there is a huge part of our society, people of color, who started at a disadvantage. Same human beings like you. People may have a pet, and the pet's owner as a human being stands as the owner of and at a higher level than the pet, but not one human being over another, and because of the color of their skin. Even when people of color fought all those battles to get to where they are, or get to where they were, I don't know, a few decades ago, they were still facing a situation of great oppression and poverty. And people, white people, Caucasian people, rich people who had the means to bring drugs into this country, took to those people who were already oppressed and looking for any way to find not only hope, but to get relief from the daily torment of the oppression, and introduced drugs into their society. Introduced drugs into their society and their group, and made them users, and then made them sellers, made them the middleman to get the drugs to the users, all within the minority community. While the people who imported the drugs, who had the money to do this, are getting rich or getting richer. There are a lot of things that people of color were subjected to. And affirmative action was one way of saying, look, we understand that you are starting so late in the game trying to get a leg up, that we're going to give you opportunities that you would not normally have. The fact is that majority of these universities have people who get in because of their heritage, because or it's not heritage, but hereditarily, right? Their parents are rich. They're donors to the universities. They donate a football stadium. They donate a wing. They donate whatever. They're relative of a relative of a relative, and they all get in. Trustees, they all get in. We don't have that kind of wealth. Many of us don't, at least. Or the majority of us don't, at least. And we don't get that privilege. Look at how the scholarships are given out. Look at the disproportionate way the scholarships are awarded. So there's got to be something to level the playing field. I'm not asking you to take someone who is a person of color, who is not, hasn't shown the academic abilities and no intention of pursuing excellence, and just letting them run through your university or college. We're saying someone who has all the abilities but doesn't have the avenue, the path, the way, the means to get there. This is an opportunity to pick that person up and say, you belong here, because outside of your being a person of color, you possess every other skill of excellence that these universities represent. And so it comes down to the bottom line, and that is the Supreme Court. I thought about it for a while. Many things crossed to my mind. And one of those things that kept bothering me is, how did they come up with or allow this to get so far that a body that is supposed to represent the law, fairness, equality, and justice, it's a judiciary, right? Its makeup is based on political ideology. Let's break this down. So presidents get to nominate judges, including let's talk about the Supreme Court specifically. Judges on the Supreme Court. And they go through a vetting process and a hearing, and their success is usually based on who is in the majority in government at the time and how it is. And let's examine this closer. It's not even fair enough to say, and none of it is fair, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but it's not even fair enough to say, if you're a Republican president and you were the president of the United States, you get to nominate someone, and unless the person, there's something egregious or something really bad in their history, they get confirmed. And so, even though that's a problem, that's the way it is. Well, it's not, right? Because Barack Obama, who was a Democrat, was president. Mitch McConnell was, the Republicans were a majority in the Senate. Mitch McConnell was the speaker. And so he made sure that when Barack Obama had the opportunity to nominate another judge, which they felt would have made the court lean liberal, they blocked him for almost a year until he was out of office, and then left it now for their president, who was next one was Donald Trump, to get the advantage to do so. Then it was okay. We haven't heard anybody, even the Republican Party, look in the mirror and say what we did was wrong. So the system is broken. A member of the judiciary should not be making decisions based on Republican ideology or Democratic ideology. There are laws. There is righteousness. They take an oath when they get sworn in that's under God. God did not decide to create us and say, you're Republican, you're Democrat, you're white, you're black, so I'm going to do something different with the way I created you. We all look equal. If you look at us in our entirety, there are people of all different body types, challenges, illnesses, everything, height, weight, that from every single race in this world. So if God didn't discriminate, how dare you? The Supreme Court should be made up of, and I thought about this part too. Why are there 9 members? I'm assuming that the whole thought pattern behind that was that if you had a tie, you'd have a tiebreaker. But the Supreme Court is making decisions on cases that have reached a level where they are critical, right? When you get to the Supreme Court. So maybe the number should be even. Maybe let's think about this for a second. Suppose we had 10 members on the Supreme Court. And those 10 members in the Supreme Court were not nominated by presidents. They were nominated by Congress and required to get 80%. Maybe. Make it a large number. So when you finally get someone on the Supreme Court, they have satisfied most of each party's questions and concerns that represent, now I would assume at least, almost 50-50, right? Of represent almost equally their constituents and therefore ideological beliefs of the majority of our society. So let's say we could do that. Yes, it might be a hard process, it might be a tedious process, but remember that the Supreme Court judge is a position for life. So now we've got 10 members there who have gone through a vetting process where they're satisfied the majority of both Democrats and Republicans. And because these decisions that they make are so critical, then they have to work at it and come up with a decision that now satisfies, let's say, maybe, 8 out of 10 of the judges. So that you're faced with laws being made where the majority, the decision satisfies the needs and supports the majority of the population. This system they have of 9 and because it can get really lopsided, right? I mean, if you look at the fact that President Trump got to nominate, I forgot how many judges, was it 2? Or maybe 3? I think it was 3. If President Obama was able to go through the fairness of nominating the judge that he had in there, albeit, again, the process is broken because he would have nominated someone more liberal, right? Then maybe the court would be a little bit more balanced. But it's not. And the decisions are not made based on law and fairness and righteousness and the things that judges swear an oath to. The decisions are made on political ideology, even within their own parties. If there's a candidate or there's someone, it seems like it's strange, the decisions that they're making. Look at the decision on Roe versus Wade. And I talked about that in an episode before, but look at what happened there. Why should I understand that when you're with a partner, a man or woman, and you conceive a child, that a man says, well, because I'm a father, I had a part to do with it too. But for the whole pain and suffering and the 9 months of delivery, all I could do was run to the store. Yes, dear, get what you needed. Yes, dear, I'll fluff your pillow. Yes, dear, I'll rub your feet. Yes, dear, I'll get you a glass of water. Yeah. Yes, dear, why are you so upset at me, dear? I didn't do anything wrong, right? That was our role. Let's face it, man. And yet men are making decisions about women and their bodies, and it goes to the extent of making decisions where a woman should keep a baby if she was raped. I want to know how many men out there, including the men on the Supreme Court, how would they feel if they are too old to have kids, or maybe they're children? How would you feel if you have a son and a daughter-in-law, and your son and daughter-in-law have a couple of kids, and then your daughter-in-law was raped, and the exact law you pushed through makes her have to keep a child, and every day you've got to look at a child, and let's make it even worse. Let's say she was raped and they never found the rapist. So the rapist was never tried, convicted, or anything. You're looking at a child now that looks, a lot of that child looks nothing like your family. Maybe there's one of those situations where they came out totally different. We're living in a world where we're fighting racial issues right now, right? So let's say it was a Caucasian, a white woman raped by a person of color who they never found. And that child comes out so different that you can see visibly, you cannot turn away from how that child looks to the other children. Think about the husband and how he feels about his wife being violated like that. And think about you, members of the Supreme Court, who are obviously completely out of touch to me. Imagine now you having to look at that child every day. You made the rule that woman who was doing everything, raising her family, doing everything right, had an unfortunate encounter. And you're making your family live through that every single day of their lives, every single time they look at that child. There's no way you could ignore the fact of how that child was conceived. What is wrong with us? And at the same time, I got to tell you, as someone of faith, as a spiritual person, I kind of know what's wrong with us. Because if you look at what the Bible tells you, these days, they said they were coming, they're here. We as human beings are destroying everything that God created us to be. We are so full of ourselves and so much believe that we somehow created ourselves, are the masters of our own universe, that we have become so what's the word I'm looking for? So boastful, so hateful, so greedy. There's a whole lot of adjectives that we really think that we have some level of superiority. And yet each and every day, somewhere around this world, watches someone else pass on from this world. We think we have victory in this world, yet we have no victory over life. We can't predict whether we'll breathe the next moment from now. And we have the audacity to treat each other in this manner, and the audacity to make decisions that completely contradict, even as biblically taught, what law is supposed to be. And we have judges who will completely contradict the oath they took, and are making decisions that are taking this country down a path to complete the task of destruction that is undertaken. I don't know what it will take for things to change. And to be honest with you, why I enlist your help the way I do is because I need to support people individually. Because the world as a whole is not going to change. I'm sorry. It's going to get worse. And it's going to get worse because not only because if we look at ourselves, we can see if we look in the mirror how much worse we've become than generations before us. But we are living out that book, the Bible. We are living out its prophecy. Before I go off tonight, I have a friend of mine. He's been on my show a couple of times. I love chatting with him. He sends me things every day, words of wisdom, and he's very in tune with life. He's very in tune with the inequalities. And whenever I speak with him or even get messages from him, I learn something and I try to impart some of my thoughts so that we can exchange, and it's a fair trade because I learned so much from him, from his thoughts. And I'm gonna read. I have my phone here. For those of you listening to audio, you can't see it. I put it up in front of the camera for those who are watching me on YouTube. he sent me in WhatsApp, he said something very short, but very, very powerful. And if you've been listening to me on this episode and you take nothing else from this to ponder for the next week, the next month, the next year, I want you to ponder on this. I thought it was so powerful. He said, history does not repeat itself. People repeat history. If you think about the days we came from of the oppression of people of color, if you think about the struggles of not only people of color, but women of every creed and color, yes, women of color, white women, you are under attack too by this society that's eating away. And when it eats away at its prejudice, it includes you. It captures you in it. Student loans captures women of color and Caucasian women. Roe versus Wade does the same. Affirmative action. I want to read this before I go that I was researching. I'm turning my head because I have my computer up here. It says, it was announced on June 20th by Variety that Disney's Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Vice President LaTondra Newton will be exiting her role. Then it was announced on June 28th that Netflix's first ever head of inclusion, Verna Myers, will be leaving her role. Then on June 30th, it was announced that Warner Brothers had laid off its division diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, Karen Horn, and Janelle English will be leaving her role as Executive Vice President of Impact and Inclusion at the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences. All of this was announced around the same time as the Supreme Court decision. 4 women of color, 4 black women, either laid off or leaving their roles in major companies, and they were all diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. You heard me say it. If you have to pause when you're listening to this and listen to it again, and then Google it, go check it out. There is a mass movement to have us as human beings repeat history. Because like my friend said, history doesn't repeat itself. I am so honored, as always, to have these conversations with you. If I get to one person each and every time, get them to thinking, get them to making a commitment to be a part of the voices that must be heard. We have things like elections that are coming up next year. And I'm not on this whole, I don't know who the candidates I guess we know President Biden will be one candidate. But whomever runs against him, we need to hold both of them to the fire. We need to see the fight for inclusion, diversity, equity. We cannot go back to a place where you can't read certain books in schools. You cannot go to a place where you can't study. Imagine you cannot study the history of our diversity in certain schools like Florida. What is history? History is what happened in the past, everywhere, to everyone, to everything. You can't pick and choose what history you want to teach because you can't look in the mirror and say, I did this to another human being like myself. The best way for us to gain freedom as human beings, for our minds to be free, our hearts to be light, and for us to look at the heavens, or when we get on our knees, for us to pray and know that the God that sees all and hears all and knows all can see the truth in our hearts. For us not to be able to do that in shame, we need to accept the truth, accept each other, and understand that this one race over another, these actions in Roe versus Wade against women, these affirmative actions against minorities, the student loans actions by people who got loan forgiveness against people who are less fortunate or less wealthy or poor. All these things are acts of hatred, greed, and none of them follow, no matter what your religion is. none of them follow the God who created us. For whatever you choose to believe, that's your choice. But I will continue to do this, and I will continue to speak as God guides me to speak. Because for me and my household, we do and shall always serve the Lord. The day shall come when none of us will be here. And I hope for those who make these decisions, for those who find it in their heart to rationalize and condone hatred and racism and prejudice and watch as another race or people of color are oppressed and excluded and treated less than. And then for you to feel that you can go before Almighty Father and say, I've done a good deed. And I've earned the right to occupy a space on this planet, the space and the privilege of life that you gave me. If you can live with yourselves, then I got nothing else to say to you. I thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts for another week. Please stay in tune. I know that people get overwhelmed by the news and the media twists and turns everything. But if you search enough, there are sources out there that are honest and truthful. And you are smart enough. We're all smart enough to think for ourselves, to not be brainwashed by people who use the opportunity and use the fact that they know that racism and hatred lives in the hearts of many people to make them believe what they know not to be true, just so they can win more power, more greed, and turn more of human beings against each other, all for their entertainment. Thanks again. Take care of yourselves. Have a great week ahead. Until the next time, please take care of yourselves and each other.